Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 582, and today's date is February 3rd, 2015, and the title of this episode is U.S. Government Central Bankers' Economic Recovery is Based on a Big Lie. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that Greece is trying to deal with Germany, the ECB, the central banking system. They're trying to come up with different types of proposals. And as we discussed yesterday, we realize that they're just renaming a debt haircut. And we see that the central bankers are saying, you know something? All these proposals are exactly the same. You want us to write off the debt. And Germany says Greece's plan is half-baked, and they should refrain from new proposals every day. We're not going to play this game. You owe us the money, period. And if they continually go down this path, Greece might look at different alternatives. And I can see as we go further with threats from the central bank, them pushing Greece and not even looking at their proposals, we can see Greece eventually will turn away. We can see that Germany saying, I don't like the tone of voice out of Athens at all. That's not the way to talk to one another in Europe. And just like that, everything is back to square one. Nothing has gotten accomplished. Because basically what Greece wants is a debt write-off. They want to give the people a chance to spur economic growth in their country. But, as we know, the ECB, Germany, IMF, the entire central banking system, no. Debt is debt is debt is debt. No matter how you got it, illegally, it doesn't matter, you have to repay it. Well, they really don't. Look what Iceland did. They put their bankers in jail, they wrote off a lot of their debt, and their country is doing pretty darn good. Of course, the corporate media is not reporting on that because they don't want anyone to know that, hey, if you get rid of the central banking system, your country thrives. Actually, this is what the founding fathers did during the American Revolution. They broke apart from the central banking system, and the country thrived. And we need to do the same thing once again. We need to take everything that we know, everything that the U.S. government central bankers tried to make us forget, and we need to remember what is the cause of all these problems. It's the central banking system. Loaning money out with debt due on it. And we can see as the debt continually grows, it is impossible to pay off. It's a system that can never work. The only way it works is to make those who are running it very, very wealthy. And this is all that we are seeing. So if we can get rid of the central bankers, and when things don't go their way, what they do is they push war. They keep us in fear. This is where all this is coming from. It's not the people of each country. It is the governments. It is the central banking system that is causing all of this. And when I talk about things like Russia, or I talk about the government here in the United States, I'm not anti-American. I'm completely American. And I want things that work for the people, and only for the people, not for corporations, not for the central bankers. We need things that help the people only, period. Obamacare. If it was so great, Obama would be flashing around saying, I got my Obamacare. I signed up. I was the first one. But he didn't. Our government officials didn't. Why? Because they knew it was not good. It was really not for the people. It was for the insurance companies. It was to bring in revenue. It was to place taxes and bring in revenue to the government. And we are not giving the benefits to the people. They knew this. They understood it. This is why they didn't want anyone to read it when they were trying to push it. This is why they didn't sit in front of the television showing everyone, look how great this is. Where were they? Where were our leaders Well, guess what? These aren't our leaders. They're not for the people. And this is what this is all about. This is about bringing control back to the people, for the people, not for the corporations, not for the central banking system, and not for those government officials who only care about their pocketbook, their wallet in the government, because this is all we're seeing right now. And we can see here in the United States that, yes, this entire economic recovery is a big, big lie. Jim Clifton, chairman, CEO of Gallup, he is coming out there and he is saying, well, yeah, the 5.6% unemployment is a big lie. Now, we've been discussing this for a very long time. And he went on to say, here is something that many Americans, including some of the smartest and most educated among us, don't know. The official unemployment rate, as reported by the U.S. Department of Labor, is extremely misleading. Well, I'm going to call it, it's fake. It's manipulated to convince us that we're in a recovery. If you, a family member or anyone, is unemployed and has subsequently given up on finding a job, if you are so hopelessly out of work that you've stopped looking over the past 4 weeks, the Department of Labor doesn't count you as unemployed. Now, we discussed this many, many times, but here we have someone coming out saying, yes, this is true. It confirms everything that we've been talking about. The Department of Labor will not count you if you didn't find work in the past 4 weeks. Now, you still could be looking, but they will not count you. While you are as unemployed as one can possibly be, and tragically may never find work again, you are not counted in the figure we see relentlessly in the news. There's another reason why the official rate is misleading. Say you're an out-of-work engineer or healthcare worker or construction worker or retail manager. If you perform a minimum of 1 hour of work in a week and you are paid at least $20, maybe someone pays you to mow their lawn, you're not officially counted as unemployed in the much reported 5.6%. Again, we've stated before, if you do not meet the state's requirements of working a certain number of hours, earning a certain number of dollars, like those people who are working part-time in retail, most of those people are not counted. Even though they were making money and now they're unemployed, they're not factored into this number. Those working part-time but wanting full-time work, if you have a degree in chemistry or math and are working 10 hours part-time because it is all you can find, in other words, you are severely underemployed, which a lot of people are today, the government doesn't count you. There's no other way to say this. The official unemployment rate, which cruelly overlooks the suffering of the long-term and often permanently unemployed as well as the depressingly underemployed, amounts to a big lie, he says. A good job is an individual's primary identity, their very self-worth, their dignity. It establishes the relationship they have with their friends, community, and country. When we fail to deliver a good job that fits a citizen's talents, training, and experience, we are failing the great American dream. Right now, the U.S. is delivering at a staggeringly low rate of 44%, which is the number of full-time jobs as a percentage of the adult population, 18 years and older. We need that to be around 50% at a bare minimum of 10 million new good jobs to replenish Americans' middle class. And we are not seeing that. Basically, what's been happening is those people who are being laid off from IBM, Sony, Dell, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and many other companies who had good paying jobs are having trouble finding those same jobs. So they have to take a job that is lower in salary or a part-time job. And I know many, many people And actually, people have been writing in saying, yes, this is true. I've been sending out my resume, and I've been getting no response whatsoever. It makes no sense to me. I've graduated college, and all I can do is get a part-time job. I know my wife's cousin who graduated college, and I mentioned this before, he can only find a part-time job. He can't find a full-time job in his major. So he's living with his parents, working a part-time job. And we can see by everything that we've been looking at, retail closures, housing market, everything is starting to fall apart, and everything is a big lie. They need to do this to keep this recovery illusion alive. We see that the factory orders have plunged to 5-month lows. It's the 5th month in a row that factory orders plunged. What does this tell us? That means factories are not producing. That means products are not entering the retail market. That means people are not buying. Actually, it's the opposite. People are not buying, so factories don't have to produce. And this is why we see this happening. And if factories aren't producing, they don't need the raw materials. If they don't need the raw materials, guess what? The Baltic Dry Index goes down. And this is what we're seeing. The ISM New York crashed and factory orders plunged. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. The Baltic Dry Index fell again. We are now at 577 points. And again, for those people who don't know what the Baltic Dry Index is, this is the raw material the factories use for production. And again, if people aren't out there buying products, if people aren't out there buying cars, if people aren't out there buying all these different things and corporations aren't out there purchasing, guess what? There's no need to produce. If there's no need to produce, there's no need for raw material. And we see this is what's happening. We see the economy is being dragged down. The people, the middle class, is tapped out. They're tapped out. They have no money. They can't find jobs. Don't have a job. You're not going to go out and buy things. Guess what you're going to do? You're going to try to survive. We understand that 47% of the American public, 50%, which is half of the people, are living paycheck to paycheck. They just have enough to pay for what they have. They have no disposable income to go out and purchase extra goods. They just have enough. Actually, a lot of them only last about 21 days, and then they run out of money until the next paycheck. And we see the situation here in the United States is actually getting worse. And this is why the U.S. government central bankers are pushing war so hard. They're pushing as hard as they possibly can, and we can see in Ukraine. We see in the Middle East with the Islamic State, which is controlled by the United States government, to keep us in fear, to push us into war. They're pushing their agendas, and they're not going to stop until they get the event, until they get the war. This is their entire goal. This is their entire mission at this point. They need to keep this system alive until that happens. And they will do everything and anything they possibly can to manipulate the data. And this is what they've been doing. Now, we understand back in 2011, S&P came out and they downgraded the U.S. And, of course, the U.S. government was out there saying, how dare you downgrade the U.S.? And they brought a lawsuit against S&P. And we can see the Department of Justice lawsuit was for about $1.5 billion. And S&P agrees not to accuse the government of retaliation for the U.S. downgrade. This is all part of the suit. So it's kind of ridiculous that they're agreeing not to accuse the government when they put that into the lawsuit. You know the government actually needed to be downgraded, and they don't want S&P coming after them. So it's kind of ridiculous what they're doing here. But we can see right now, S&P and all the rating agencies are controlled and manipulated by banks and the government. And if you slip up, they will push you and make you do the things they want. And this is exactly what's going on. Now, Barack Obama is out there. He's saying that we need to start spending money because the the economy is recovering and we need to put America into more and more debt. Well, this is the way the system works under a central banking system. If you do not push more and more debt out there, the system collapses. So you need to continually do this. And this is why he wants more spending. I mean, how much debt can the United States handle? I feel that we're entering this area of a point where we are going to completely collapse because all of this debt cannot be sustained. And it's evident that the U.S. government, the central banking system, is trying to cover up this entire collapse because they understand it cannot be maintained. Of course, as they speak to the American public, they try to tell you, yes, more debt is good. When there's more debt, it's just better. No, it's actually the opposite. Think about your own personal financial situation. Let me ask you, when you have more debt, do you feel that it's better when you have about 10 credit cards, a rent or mortgage, 2 cars, auto insurance, and you're paying about 20 different bills and you're left with negative income at the end of the month? Do you feel that's better? Or do you feel that it is better when you have no payments whatsoever and you get to keep all of this money? Well, I'm going to say that it's better not to have the debt. So all of this talk about debt and all talk about let's push more debt out there is absolutely ridiculous. This is coming from the central banking system because that is their product. Remember, the central banks have no allegiance to any government or country. Their allegiance is debt. That is it. And stealing the wealth from every country and every person. This is all they're about. Now, if you remember, we talked about how Russia was trying to create their own payment system which would bypass SWIFT completely. Well, it seems like it is completed. Russia's new national payment system is up and running. On January 30th, 2015, the first 5 banks, including regional ones, started processing some Russian domestic MasterCard transactions via the National Payment System, NPS. And we can see right now they're going to push this out. The transfer of Russian domestic transaction processing of international payment system cards, the NPS, will be implemented in stages and should be completed by March 31st, 2015. They will completely be separate and apart from the Western banking system, the SWIFT system, and they will be handling all their payments. Now, we talked about this before in the reports, and here we see they have completed the system completely because they realize what is coming. They understand they need to separate themselves from the private Western central banking system. China also realizes this, and what they're doing right now is they're involving India and Russia in its One Belt, One Road project. China has dealt a final blow to ambitious New Silk Road initiative launched by the United States in 2011. The New Silk Road Economic Belt and the Maritime Silk Road of the 21st Century projects aimed at creating vast infrastructure connecting Beijing to Central Asia and Middle East were launched by China's president in order to boost China's economic and political ties across Eurasia. China's New Silk Road comprises of a vast number of routes, including the ancient Silk Road, which connected China, Europe via Central Asia, the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar route, an economic corridor linking China and Pakistan through Kashmir, and Maritime Silk Road, providing China with seamless access to distant seaports, including the new Suez Channel ports in Egypt. On February 2nd, during trilateral talks between Chinese, Indian, and Russian foreign ministers, China's FM called upon New Delhi and Moscow to join Beijing's One Belt, One Road strategy to create an economic corridor across Eurasia. It seems that the move dealt a final blow to Washington's idea to create a U.S.-controlled New Silk Road in Eurasia, undermining both its political and economic influence in Asia. And we can see, and we've talked about this many, many times, China has been making deals all around the world. While the U.S. government central bankers have been waging war, building up military troops, Russia and China have been working with many different countries, creating bilateral trades, pushing the yuan and renminbi, and we understand the yuan renminbi, they will be looked at by the IMF to become a reserve currency. Now, we talked about this a long time ago. Of course, people back then thought, this is crazy. They're never going to become a reserve currency. But here we are today, where they're going to be looked at. Now, of course, the United States is going to try to stop this and do everything they possibly can to make it where they don't become a reserve currency. They're going to try regime change. They're going to push us into war. They will do everything they possibly can to stop the BRIC system. We see Switzerland already depegged from the euro, and they have a clearinghouse for the yuan renminbi in Switzerland. We see many countries are doing this. One of the countries that are not is the United States. Very interesting, isn't it? Now, as we know, all the countries around the world are looking to keep track of every single person. This is in England, this is in Spain, this is in France, this is in Italy, the United States, Canada, Australia, you name it, they are worried. We understand Spain is training police officers for civil disobedience. We understand France, they're putting more and more troops on the streets. Belgium's doing the same. Australia, Canada, and the US. They're all doing this. They're getting ready for the major collapse, for rioting, for civil disobedience. The British police right now have uploaded 18 million pictures of the public to a facial recognition database without telling the Home Office or independent watchdogs. Thousands of photos in the database are of innocent people who have never been charged or convicted of any crime whatsoever. Interesting. Britain's High Court back in 2012 said retaining any of these photographs of innocent people is completely illegal. And this is coming from Lord Justice Richards, ordering the police to revise their policies within months. But guess what? They haven't done it. They're keeping all of these in their database, and the police forces are using them. They want to do the same thing here in the U.S. The FBI has already created a facial recognition database because they're creating social profiles of every single person. They're keeping track of everyone, your purchases, who you talk to. They want to know. They're creating the lists. They need to make sure they understand who is going to be a threat to their authority. In England, we talked about this before. The British Army is mobilizing about 1,500 Facebook warriors to spread disinformation. Trolls, basically. To spread things and to counter things that people are saying on social media. Because they're trying to disrupt people from speaking about other things than what the government wants them speaking about. And of course, this is an attack on free speech. We can see they're pushing their agenda as hard as they possibly can. We understand Obama said he was going to reform the NSA. Well, guess what? The reforms are very weak. They really didn't happen. Actually, NSA is now spying on more and more people. And they're not going to stop. Now we have the FBI with the facial recognition database. We understand they're collecting DNA. We understand Real ID is going out there, which will have all this information in one central location to be shared with Canada and Mexico and other countries. Your personal information is being shared with everybody. Now, we understand the illegal immigrants are coming across the border, and basically what's happening is if you can get across the border, you are then allowed to stay here. So why do we even have checkpoints at this point? It makes no sense, because all you got to do is jump a fence and you can stay here and get a work permit. Well, it has been revealed that President Obama basically has given out about 5.46 million work permits to non-immigrant foreigners who originally arrived as tourists, students, or illegal immigrants since 2009. Jessica Vaughn, policy director at the Center of Immigration Studies, filed a Freedom of Information request to determine just how many work permits the Obama administration has been handing out. The true magnitude of how often he has evaded the limits set by Congress on foreign workers has never been known until now. She said findings show that 1.8 million new work permits issued to aliens with temporary visas, about 1.2 million, 67%, were not authorized by law to work during their stay. For example, more than 470,000 work permits were issued to aliens on tourist visas, and 532,000 were issued to foreign students. More than 156,000 were issued to dependents of students and guest workers, all in categories not authorized for employment by law. A large number of work permits, 1.7 million, were awarded to aliens whose status was completely unknown. Work permits are gateway documents to driver's license and other benefits, and if the government agency issuing them does not know who or will not disclose how the bearer arrived in the country, how can others rely on the authenticity of an individual's identity? And this is why we have procedures for people to come into this country, because we have no idea who these people are. If they're illegal and they're jumping a fence just coming in, there's no way to verify any of the information, and this is exactly what we see going on here. Now, the Obama administration wants to make certain illegal immigrants know all about the benefits of executive amnesty. So the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services released the 2 new flyers available in English and Spanish, letting people know, listen, just come up to America, jump the fence, and you can have all the benefits you want. You can get a work permit, and you can come into this country. And we won't even ask who you are. Why? Because this is a benefit to the corporations. They can go ahead and work for the corporations, and the corporations will not be penalized by Obamacare. They will not have to pay that $3,000 penalty. So they will take those people before an American citizen. Now, I'm not against people coming to this country. This is how we all got here. One way or another, we had to arrive. But again, there has to be certain procedures you need to follow to enter the country. You cannot just jump a fence and say, okay, I'm here, put me to work. It just doesn't work that way, especially when there are so many Americans out of work, so many Americans underemployed who've been living here, struggling. And we understand now that, and we always knew, that the unemployment rates are completely fake, phony, and false. Now, we understand Obamacare was definitely not for the people. We realize this. We understand from everything that we've been looking at and how we've been lied to, we realize this. Well, Texas Senator Ted Cruz on Monday has introduced a bill to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which is Obamacare. But again, this is not going to work because, as we know, if this bill actually reaches the desk of Obama, he's just going to veto it. So at this point right now, it cannot be repealed. Yes, they can try, and Senator Ted Cruz says he's going to continually send this bill over and over to Obama and just to keep him busy with it. And we can see right now that this is not going to change, and eventually, hopefully, the American people realize that this is not a benefit to them, and they insist on the government repealing this law that nobody read because they weren't allowed to, or they didn't feel they wanted to go ahead and see what was in there whatsoever because they were exempt anyway from it, so who really gives a damn about it? But we can see right now that Obamacare is definitely not for the people. Now, we understand yesterday we talked about the NYPD. They're creating this new force that will handle terrorism and protests. But what's very interesting is what the NYPD commissioner said. He said the reason they're doing this is because terrorism and protests are roughly the same thing. And this is why we need a special unit to handle both. Really? People who are peacefully protesting, it's the same thing as terrorism? Well, we can see where the mindset is today. They really don't believe in the rights of the people to protest and to give their opinion on what they think about. Instead, they want to push them down and keep them quiet. That's what it's all about. Now, we understand the Islamic State allegedly cut off and murdered the 2 Japanese people that spoke English on the videos. And we're seeing, and we've mentioned this before, and I mentioned this back in episode 253, back in January 2nd of 2014, where Abe was trying to change Article 9. And I said this yesterday, I think it was yesterday or maybe 2 days ago, where this is going to be used for Abe to come out and say, hey, we need to change Article 9. And guess what? All of a sudden, Abe is out there and he's pushing his agenda. I mean, is this all set up? This can't be a coincidence. No, this is all planned. They want Japan to change their constitution. After being unable to save the 2 hostages held by the Middle Eastern extremist, Prime Minister Abe said constitutional change will be needed to protect the lives and assets of Japanese citizens. Abe has said at times that with the current interpretation of Article 9, which forbids both the use of force to settle international disputes and the maintenance of regular armed forces, it is difficult to protect Japanese citizens. Here we are once again, them having a law, having everything ready to go, just waiting for the event, and here we are. They're pushing again to have Article 9 changed. And we've seen this in Australia. We've seen this in Canada, in France, in Belgium, in England, in the United States. Every time there's an event, just by coincidence, they have the laws and everything ready to go, and they bring it up. Now this is the time to change it. Well, it seems like all of this has been set up on purpose to push certain agendas. Now, it looks like Russia has now announced plans for a joint military drills with North Korea this year. Russian Defense Ministry on Friday said that they will hold talks with defense ministries officials in Brazil, Cuba, North Korea, and Vietnam, adding Russia would stage joint drills of those countries in its Army, Navy, and Air Force. And of course, they're flexing their muscles because we see the United States and NATO having their drills. So both sides are now flexing muscles and preparing for what is coming. Right now, we see the United States is trying to push the UN to have a regime change in North Korea. President Obama already mentioned this. According to the UN's point man on human rights in North Korea, they're saying that, we might need a regime change, but he is not advocating a military option by force whatsoever. And of course, we know the United States government, with the release of the interview with the Sony hacking allegedly by North Korea, which we know it was not, they're pushing the agenda of regime change in North Korea, in China, and Russia, and in Venezuela. And we can see that in Venezuela, since they cannot get this regime change, what are they doing? Well, they're placing more sanctions on Venezuela. Well, it makes no sense. Why would they place more sanctions when Obama said sanctions do not work? They didn't work with Cuba. But they're placing sanctions on Iran, they're placing sanctions on Russia, and they're placing sanctions on Venezuela. So wait a minute, do they work or don't they work? It makes no sense. They can't keep their story straight anymore. The new sanctions expand the number of Venezuelan government officials barred from entering the United States. The new U.S. sanctions are in response to a wave of unrest that hit Venezuela in early of 2014. Around 43 people died as anti-government groups took to the streets with weapons ranging from firearms to Molotov cocktails and homemade bazookas to demand Maduro step down. Now, like I said before, when the United States backs the people, it's about democracy. It's about freedom. Once they change the government and they control the government with a puppet government, which is not elected, those people who are rising up, those are terrorists. We've seen it in every single country so far. It's the same M.O. It doesn't change. Now, out in Afghanistan, we talked about how the troops are never leaving Afghanistan. Well, it seems that is coming true, and we've been following this very carefully, and we realize now the Islamic State is moving into Afghanistan, and of course they are. The new president signed the bilateral security agreement which the government wanted to keep the troops in Afghanistan. Now, Carter responded to a 91-page questionnaire from the Senate Armed Services Committee. They gave him this, and they said to him, would you consider changing the troop drawdown plan and keeping the troops in Afghanistan and actually adding to them? He said, absolutely. Since the Islamic State is on the move, we're going to have to ramp up our troops inside Afghanistan. Well, again, we talked about this many, many times before, and here we are again where everything is coming true, where they'll be ramping up troops in Afghanistan. We've been following this, we understand it, and we can see how it all works. Now, we understand out in Ukraine a Tochka U tactical missile. They are saying the Lugansk Donetsk people shot it down and they have fragments and pieces, and they want the OSCE to investigate, and they're saying that they will track down the trajectory of the missile and we will prove who actually shot the missile. Now again, this Tochka missile can handle nuclear, chemical, or everyday explosive payloads in the missile. And we can see right now, Ukraine, Kiev, they are really pushing the war agenda right now. Now, as we know, Kiev is using the Western lethal arms. There have been arms that have been found with NATO and U.S. markings on it right now. Of course, the U.S. government is out there saying, we're going to decide if we're going to be sending defensive or offensive type of weapons. Well, guess what? They're already there. This is just propaganda and a tactic to show everyone that they're thinking about it. Maybe they will bring it. The training has already started. U.S. trainers are already in Ukraine, training the Ukrainian forces. They're getting ready for a major, major offensive. We can see that Poroshenko is losing his grip on his people. Protesters reportedly tried to storm the Ukrainian president's office in Kiev, saying, we've had enough. We don't want this. We don't want to be drafted. So they better start this offensive very quickly, because we're starting to see the people are starting to realize what's going on here, and they don't want to be a part of it. And we can see they're trying to push their agenda as hard as they possibly can. Now, we understand Libya's senior diplomats are in Washington right now, pleading to Congress. They're saying that the Islamic State is now setting up global terrorism bases in our country. And this is the puppet government that is in the United States right now, pleading for the United States to come in and help with the situation. We would love for you to come in and get rid of the Islamic State, and also, that new government that took over, and get rid of all those people that are rising up against us. That's the real mission. And they're right now pleading to Congress to help out. It seems that in Syria, their chemical weapon production facilities, all 12 of them, have been destroyed. Destruction was completed on January 31st. So this whole chemical weapons narrative that the United States government is trying to use is completely falling apart. Right now, they have nothing left. They don't know what else to do, but don't worry. They're going to be coming up with something big so they can bring the troops into Syria, so they can go ahead and try to get Assad. We see already the Islamic State has shot down warplanes in Syria. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the Islamic State fired a surface-to-air missile that knocked out an unidentified fighter jet on January 29th. This marked the first use of an anti-aircraft weapons by the Islamic State in Damascus. Basically, what they're trying to do is set up a no-fly zone. They've been trying to do this. Turkey wants this. They want a no-fly zone in this area, and they're still pushing for it. Senior U.S. intelligence officials said the footprint of the Islamic State is growing bigger and bigger. They have expanded in Syria, in Iraq. They've moved into Algeria, Libya, Lebanon, and Yemen. We are going to need troops on the ground. This is the entire push. And we've been tracking this and watching this. And we know that Hagel is out there saying, yes, we're going to need troops. McCain is out there saying, yes, we want troops. And eventually what we're going to see those troops. Slowly but surely they're using mission creep, but that won't be enough. Eventually they're going to say enough is enough. Let's get this war started. Let's put the troops in there and set up everything. We see Israel getting ready, bombing the Golan Heights, moving into Lebanon. A big push for war. And of course, the other side didn't start it. Israel is provoking. The United States is provoking. You see what's going on here. They're getting ready for this major offensive in this area. Now, as we know, the Jordanian pilot, it's all over the news right now, he was burned alive. There was a video, and I was watching the video on Live Leaks, and all of a sudden it was taken down, and I was trying to save it at the same exact time that it was taken down, and I couldn't do it. But I did watch it. But I wasn't able to analyze every single piece of it. Now all we see is pictures. If anyone has a real full-length video of the burning, please send me the link. And I'm not talking about the one that's CNN, Fox. Those aren't the real ones I want. I want the full video of what is really going on. I've been searching for it, and I'll start to search once I'm after this. But of course, Jordan is out there, and they're saying that they are going to retaliate. They want revenge. Of course, what they're trying to do. Look what has happened in the last couple of months. Attacks in Canada, Australia, France. A hostage killed for Japan. Now Jordan. They're bringing every single country in, slowly but surely. Getting them all hyped up. We're getting ready for war. You want revenge? We gotta go after the Islamic State. But this isn't their goal. This isn't really what they're not doing. They're going after Assad, then into Iran. This is their plan, and they're hoping that Russia and China join in because they want the war to get started. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.